Ava, after 15 years with Novalink Technologies, we're restructuring your position, said Karen Delaney, the Vice President of Operations. Her voice had a rehearsed softness to it, masking the quiet triumph behind her eyes. She sat across from me in a glass conference room, flanked by Rebecca from Human Resources. Both wore the same bland corporate expressions I'd seen delivered to others before me. The company is heading in a new direction, Rebecca added, sliding a manila folder toward me. Your contributions have been deeply appreciated, but we're merging the research division into product development. I took the folder without looking inside. I already knew what was in it: 2 weeks of severance pay for every year of service, 3 months of continued health benefits, and a pamphlet of career counseling resources I had no intention of using. I understand, I said calmly, my voice even. They both visibly relaxed. Clearly, they had braced themselves for tears, outrage, or a breakdown. After all, I was a 58-year-old woman being ushered out of the tech industry, where youthful energy is praised while decades of experience are quietly discarded. What they didn't know was that I had seen this coming. Ever since I accidentally received an internal email thread last month mapping out Phase 1 of restructuring, I'd been preparing. We'll need you to clean out your office by Friday, Karen continued, gaining confidence from my composure. Return your laptop, phone, and badge before you leave. Your team will be notified later today. My team. 6 engineers I had hired, mentored, and built into one of the most efficient R&D squads in the company. Together, we had designed the core processing engine behind Novalink's flagship product, LedgerSync, now used by nearly half of the Fortune 500. Of course, I replied, standing with grace. Is there anything else? The 2 women exchanged a look, slightly thrown by my poise. Karen cleared her throat. No, that's all. Thank you for being so professional. As I walked back through the office, I passed the executive boardroom. Through the frosted glass, I could see CEO Damon King waving dramatically in front of a slide titled Q3 Growth Forecasts. The same Damon King who, at last year's National FinTech Conference, presented my algorithm as an innovation from the Novalink team without ever saying my name. I returned to my office, shut the door, and took out my personal phone. A single text: it's confirmed. Friday is the last day. The reply came almost instantly. Perfect. Contracts signed. Let's finalize at dinner. I smiled as I glanced at my calendar. It was Wednesday. On Friday, I'd leave Novalink behind. And on Monday. Monday would be interesting. That evening, I met Jonathan Reyes, the CEO of DataForge Solutions, Novalink's fiercest rival. He had reserved a private dining room at a quiet Italian place in downtown Denver, a solid 10 miles from Novalink's headquarters. They really did it, Jonathan said, shaking his head after we ordered. I knew they would, I replied, sipping my water. But cutting the architect of their core tech? That's short-sighted. Damon never understood what I had built. He saw the dashboard and marketing sizzle. What he missed was the algorithm beneath, the real magic. 3 months ago, I discovered Novalink never filed the patent application for my processing engine. When I asked, legal brushed it off as an oversight and promised to file it. But something didn't sit right. I dug deeper and found a memo detailing how the company intended to quietly push me out before securing the IP, planning to claim it as a product of in-house R&D without naming any inventors. What they didn't know was that I had already filed a patent on my own time, using my personal workstation, documenting improvements to the engine that increased performance by 45%. And now, DataForge held exclusive licensing rights. They said they'd handle the filing immediately, but something about the response felt off. It was too smooth, too scripted. So I started digging into Novalink's internal records, something I knew how to navigate far better than they assumed. That's when I found it. A confidential strategy memo buried deep in the legal team's drive. It laid out their plan to reclassify my algorithm as company-developed technology with no specific inventor named. They intended to remove me from the organization before securing the patent, counting on the standard assumption that anything built during employment would belong to the company. But they miscalculated. What Novalink didn't realize was that I had already been refining the algorithm on my own time, using my personal laptop and a private development environment at home. These enhancements, which boosted processing efficiency by 43%, were created entirely outside the company's infrastructure and scope. I kept meticulous logs, timestamped commits, video records, even handwritten notes. Last month, I quietly filed a patent under my own name. Thanks to Jonathan's referral, I worked with one of the top intellectual property attorneys in the country. The process moved quickly, almost suspiciously fast, but everything was airtight. Ownership, documentation, timelines. Every I was dotted. Every T crossed. All the paperwork is finalized, Jonathan said, sliding a leather folder across the table. As soon as you sign, DataForge officially licenses exclusive rights to your patent. Press release hits Monday morning. You'll be our new Chief Innovation Officer. I opened the folder, even though I'd already memorized the terms, a 7-figure signing bonus, substantial equity, and ongoing royalties from every product that uses my algorithm. I glanced up at Jonathan. "What do you think Damon's face will look like when he realizes?" he asked, grinning. "I'm more concerned about my team," I said. "They don't deserve to be caught in the fallout." He nodded. "Already taken care of. We've got offers lined up for all 6 senior roles, major pay bumps, full benefits. If they want in, we're ready." I picked up the pen and signed. One smooth motion, and the future was mine again, secured, validated, and finally mine. "To new beginnings," Jonathan said, raising his glass. "And to owning your value," I replied, clinking mine with his. Thursday and Friday blurred into a steady rhythm of exit interviews, transition meetings, and farewells. I kept my composure throughout, even as whispers swirled in the break room, even as people I barely knew offered sympathetic glances. Junior developers came by, asking for LinkedIn recommendations. I gave them gladly. They hadn't done this to me. Behind the scenes, I documented everything, every password, process, and project detail. Not as an act of charity, but as evidence. Evidence that I left with integrity. That I followed the rules. During my final exit interview, Rebecca from HR went through the script like she'd done it 100 times. "You understand any intellectual property developed during your employment remains the property of Novalink," she said, pushing a non-disclosure agreement across the table. "Of course," I replied smoothly. "Anything developed on company time, using company resources, within the scope of my role." She nodded, not noticing the emphasis I placed on each condition. "And you affirm you've retained no proprietary data or files?" "I've taken nothing that belongs to Novalink," I confirmed. And that was true. The patent, the real power, was mine. Always had been. I packed my box in silence. Family photos, a coffee mug from my team, the framed certificate from the company's annual Innovation Award. The irony wasn't lost on me. A collection of conference badges dangled from the corner of my monitor, 15 years' worth of summits, symposiums, and software expos. I pulled them off the hook, slipping them into the box beside the coffee mug my team had given me last Christmas. It had my name etched in silver beneath the words Code Queen. As I wrapped a small crystal award, the one they'd given me for groundbreaking algorithmic innovation, in soft tissue paper, Karen appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame like we were old friends. Her tone was carefully casual. "Just checking that everything's in order for your departure," she said, her eyes scanning the box. "Crystal clear," I replied smoothly. I placed the award in the box like a closing move in a game of chess. The same award, ironically, for the algorithm that now sat at the center of a brewing corporate crisis. "You know, Ava," Karen continued, "these decisions are never personal. Damon just thinks the company needs a more youthful direction." I looked up from the tissue paper and met her gaze. "I completely understand. Business is business. Something in my tone gave her pause. A flicker of doubt passed over her face, but it vanished just as quickly. What threat could a soon-to-be unemployed 58-year-old woman possibly pose? Will you be taking time off? She asked, her concern as manufactured as the plant on her desk. Actually, I've already lined something up, I said, taping the box shut. Oh! Her eyebrows lifted. I start Monday. A leadership position. She blinked, clearly surprised. That's fast. Anything interesting? Very, I said, smiling. I'm quite excited about it. She nodded, already disengaging, her mind moving on to the next HR casualty. Well, good luck with that. With my keycard surrendered and my personal belongings in tow, I walked out of Novalink's glass tower for the final time. I paused on the sidewalk, turning to take one last look. 15 years of my life had been spent behind those walls. On the top floor, lights glowed in the executive conference room. No doubt they were discussing how to redistribute my work among cheaper, less experienced staff. What they didn't know was that in just 72 hours, that same room would be hosting an emergency meeting of a very different kind. Monday morning dawned crisp and clear. I dressed deliberately, charcoal power suit, low heels, and a watch I hadn't worn since my promotion 5 years ago. At exactly 7:30 a.m., the sleek black town car from DataForge pulled up to my home. I stepped in, calm and ready. Press release just went live, Jonathan said as I entered my new corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. It's already gaining traction. Trade blogs are running with it. Comms team is monitoring everything. The announcement had been worded with surgical precision. DataForge acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary processing technology. Welcomes inventor Ava Reynolds as Chief Innovation Officer. It highlighted my credentials, named me as the sole patent holder, and clearly stated that any current users of the technology, including Novalink, would need to negotiate a license with DataForge moving forward. At exactly 9:15 a.m., my phone lit up. A text from Miguel, my former lead engineer. Complete chaos here. What did you do? I smiled and typed back. Check your personal email. Offers are waiting for all of you. Meanwhile, 8 miles across Denver, the routine executive meeting at Novalink had turned into a full-blown panic session. Miguel's play-by-play continued. Damon walked in and found legal and finance waiting outside his office. Everyone's freaking out. I could picture it clearly: panicked voices, hastily printed documents, the dawning realization that they had made a catastrophic miscalculation. And I was just getting started. The announcement hit Novalink like a thunderclap. Within minutes, their leadership inboxes lit up with the press release, my name, my title, and the patent they thought they quietly owned now sitting firmly in the hands of their biggest competitor. By 9:30 a.m., what had started as a standard Monday meeting had devolved into an emergency crisis session. Miguel kept me updated via text. Board members are dialing in remotely. Legal's flipping through your contract line by line. They just hauled in every server from the research floor for the tech team to audit. I pictured the scene with perfect clarity. Damon pacing, demanding answers, his voice rising. Karen standing stiffly in the corner, trying to look useful. And the legal department, sweating bullets under the weight of their oversight. By now, the stock would already be tumbling. Investors don't just fear chaos, they punish it. At 10:45 a.m., I received an email. The sender, Damon King. The subject line was vague, but the tone inside was anything but. Ava, there appears to be some kind of misunderstanding. Could we speak at your earliest convenience? Damon. The desperation practically oozed through the screen. I didn't respond. I simply forwarded the message to DataForge's legal team with a note. Please handle. By noon, the tech world was buzzing. 3 major trade journals reached out for interviews, all asking the same thing. How did Novalink lose its crown jewel to its closest rival? Jonathan poked his head into my office just as I was finishing a briefing with the communications team. How are you holding up? He asked. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the skyline. Validated, I replied. 15 years of watching others take the credit. Of being told to stay humble. Of being invisible. And now, finally, they can't ignore me. My new assistant, Carla, sharp and efficient, stepped into the room. Dr. Reynolds, the development team is ready for you in conference room A. She hesitated. Also, Novalink's CEO has called 4 times this morning. Let him know I'm in meetings all day, I said calmly. Our legal team will reach out later this week about licensing terms. On my way to the meeting, another buzz from Miguel. Board just called another emergency session. Damon's fuming. Oh, and my team and I accept the offers. We're ready to start next Tuesday. I smiled to myself. The full weight of what I'd done was hitting them. Without access to my algorithm, Novalink's flagship product, Ledger Sync, was effectively crippled. The options before them were simple: license the technology from DataForge at a premium, or spend years rebuilding the foundation from scratch. Neither option looked good in a quarterly earnings report. Miguel's next update came just before lunch. Damon's calling an all-hands at 2 p.m. Word is, they're going to try to sue you. I forwarded the message to our legal team. The reply came quickly. Let them try. Your logs, timestamps, personal device usage, it's all airtight. We've prepared for this. Meanwhile, I was settling into my new role with surprising ease. At DataForge, my ideas weren't met with silence or subtle eye rolls. People listened. They took notes. They asked follow-up questions. My experience was respected, not dismissed as out of date. Later that afternoon, Jonathan walked in with the latest development metrics. The engineering team's running your optimization improvements, he said. Preliminary results show a 51% performance boost, better than our models projected. I gave him a knowing smile. That's because I never shared the best version with Novalink. Once I saw what they were planning, I stopped giving them my finest work. He laughed softly. Their loss, our gain. The message was clear. I was finally in a place that valued what I brought to the table, and this time, I owned the table. The numbers were better than we projected. Jonathan set the report on the table with a satisfied nod, confirming what I already knew. I had several refinements I never shared with Novalink, I admitted. Once I realized they were preparing to cut me out, I stopped giving them my best work. Their loss, he replied with a smirk, is definitely our gain. He glanced at his phone and added, speaking of gains, the first licensing inquiry came in this morning, not from Novalink, of course. They're still deep in denial. But Data Flow Systems reached out. They're worried about being caught in the crossfire. At 3:30 p.m., Miguel sent a message. It was a full account of Novalink's all-hands meeting. Damon had tried to project authority, assuring staff that the company would defend its intellectual property vigorously. But from Miguel's description, the fear in the room had been unmistakable. People are panicking, Miguel wrote. Half a dozen LinkedIn updates in the past hour. Karen looked like she was going to faint when someone asked if they had even filed the patent. Damon cut the Q&A short after that. By Wednesday, the fallout had intensified. 2 major clients had reached out to DataForge, exploring a transition from Ledger Sync. Their confidence in Novalink was evaporating. After all, without me or my algorithm, they were a house of cards. Meanwhile, our stock climbed another 8%. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Denise from HR, the same woman who had handed me my severance folder less than a week earlier. Ava, she began, voice painfully neutral, I'm calling about the situation with your patent. We believe there may have been a misunderstanding regarding ownership. I don't believe there was, I said evenly. My employment contract is clear. Any intellectual property developed on my own time, with my own equipment, is mine. The patent documentation reflects that. She cleared her throat. Damon was hoping you might consider coming in to discuss options. Any discussions from this point forward, I said, will go through DataForge's legal team. I'm sure they'll be happy to set up a meeting about licensing terms. The silence that followed told me everything. I'll Pass that along, she said, and hung up. That same day, I led my first formal presentation to the DataForge board of directors. The roadmap was clear, my algorithm at the center, scaled across multiple verticals. As I stood confidently at the head of the table, outlining our strategic vision, I caught Jonathan's approving nod from the end of the room. This time, I wasn't seated in the back, voiceless, while others took the credit. I was exactly where I belonged. By Friday, just 1 week after I'd walked out of Novalink for the last time, they had officially entered crisis mode. Their stock had plummeted 23% since Monday. Investors were demanding answers. Analysts were publishing stories with headlines like, "Can Novalink survive the algorithm crisis? One blunder, one exit, the collapse of a tech giant?" Through my network, I heard Damon had finally leveled with the board. They would either have to license my technology from DataForge at rates that would crush their margins or rebuild LedgerSync from scratch, avoiding any trace of my patented design. Miguel updated me during our Friday video call. "They've started interviewing new devs," he said, shaking his head. "Damon's claiming they can rebuild everything in 6 months." I couldn't help but laugh. It took me 3 years to perfect that system, and that was with full knowledge of its architecture and limitations. Good luck to them. Miguel smiled. "We're ready for Monday." And I was too, because now I wasn't just part of the industry. I was shaping its future. Miguel leaned back in his chair during our video call, shaking his head. "Nobody believes the timeline," he said. "Especially not after our team's resignation letter went public. The knowledge drain is huge." That afternoon, Novalink's legal team finally reached out to DataForge to begin discussions about potential licensing arrangements. Our legal counsel, sticking to the strategy we had meticulously planned, responded with terms that were technically reasonable but strategically unkind. 3 times the industry standard licensing fee, plus a public acknowledgement naming me as the sole inventor of the patented algorithm. Jonathan and I reviewed the draft together in his office. "They'll choke on the acknowledgement more than the cost," he said. "Damon's ego won't let him admit he pushed out the person who built the foundation of their tech." "Then they'll have to rebuild," I replied simply. "And every day they spend chasing my shadow is another day we extend our lead." The following Monday morning, 10 days after my quiet exit, I led the first official meeting of my newly assembled innovation team at DataForge. The 6 engineers I had brought with me from Novalink sat around the sleek table, energized and focused. We sketched out the roadmap for the next generation of my algorithm, expanding its capabilities beyond financial systems into logistics, healthcare, and beyond. "This is how development meetings should feel," said Anita, one of my top engineers. "Not spending half our time explaining basics to execs who don't want to understand." I nodded. That's the difference between being valued and being seen as disposable. As the meeting wrapped up, Carla stepped into the room with an urgent look. "Dr. Reynolds, a development, Novalink just announced an emergency leadership change. Damon King is stepping down immediately." The news spread fast. Within hours, tech blogs and industry media had published the headlines. Novalink CEO steps down amid patent scandal. Leadership shakeup after algorithm crisis. Karen was also out, as was their head of legal. The board had finally admitted what everyone else already knew. They'd fumbled the most critical technology oversight in the company's history. That evening, I received an email from Richard Donovan, Novalink's newly appointed interim CEO. The tone was a world apart from Damon's frantic message. "Dr. Reynolds, congratulations on your new role. I've been brought in to help Novalink stabilize and rebuild. I'd like to discuss a fair licensing agreement for your patented technology. We are prepared to publicly acknowledge your contributions and take responsibility for past mistakes. Would you be available to meet next week?" I forwarded the message to Jonathan with a brief note, Phase 1 complete. His reply came seconds later. "Beautifully executed." The board's thrilled. "They're calling it our first major victory and Novalink's most expensive lesson yet." 3 months after walking out of that glass tower, I stood on the stage at the National Technology Innovation Conference. I scanned the audience, industry leaders, reporters, rising tech professionals. Many of them now knew my story. The event organizer's voice echoed through the hall. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Ava Reynolds, Chief Innovation Officer at DataForge and the inventor of the revolutionary processing algorithm redefining enterprise systems across industries. Applause followed. This time, they were clapping for the right person. And this time, I wasn't just in the room, I was leading it. The applause was substantial as I stepped up to the podium. What a difference a few months could make. Just last year, I had attended this same conference as a silent member of Novalink's delegation, seated near the back of the ballroom while Damon gave a flashy presentation about his company's innovations. My name wasn't mentioned once, not even in passing. Thank you, I began, scanning the sea of attentive faces. Today, I want to talk about innovation ownership and the importance of properly valuing intellectual contributions, no matter where or who they come from. I walked them through the technical evolution of my algorithm. Yes, but that was just the foundation. What mattered more was the lesson it carried. Without naming Novalink, I made it clear, when companies treat innovators as interchangeable, they don't just lose talent, they lose the future. After the session, during the reception, several young women engineers approached me. One, barely 30, said softly, "Your story changed the way I work." I started documenting everything, especially what I do on my own time. Smart, I replied with a nod. Your ideas deserve protection. You do too. Later that evening, as I returned to my hotel suite, I checked my phone and saw a breaking industry alert. Novalink finalizes licensing agreement with DataForge, acknowledges Ava Reynolds as algorithms inventor. Their stock had finally stabilized, but it remained far below its pre-crisis peak. The damage had been done. Exactly 1 year to the day after I was told to clear out my desk, I sat in my bright, sunlit office at DataForge reviewing our quarterly innovation report. Under my leadership, we had launched 3 groundbreaking products built on my algorithm. All 3 had captured substantial market share, not just from Novalink, but from other legacy players in the space. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Jonathan stepped in, holding a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Happy anniversary," he said with a grin. "The board asked me to deliver this in person. Before we go public, DataForge has officially surpassed Novalink in market valuation for the first time in company history." I smiled, not with triumph, but with quiet, steady satisfaction. "That's what happens when you value innovation properly," I said, as he poured the champagne. Carla appeared at the door with a sleek envelope. "An invitation just arrived," she said. "Women in Technology's annual leadership summit. They want you as the keynote speaker. Topic: Owning Your Intellectual Value, How Documentation Reshaped an Industry." Jonathan chuckled, glancing at the envelope. "You've become something of an icon, you know." The story of the executive who didn't realize what she had until it was too late. That's a case study in half the boardrooms I've visited lately. I nodded thoughtfully. Richard Donovan stayed on at Novalink, right? He did, Jonathan confirmed. And he's implemented sweeping reforms. They're now modeling their inventor recognition policy after the program you created here. I raised my glass. It was never about revenge, I said. It was about recognition. About proving that innovation isn't anonymous, it has a name. And that name deserves to be remembered. To proper recognition, Jonathan said, clinking his glass with mine. As the afternoon sunlight poured through my window, I looked around the office I'd earned, the team I'd protected, and the legacy I'd reclaimed. At 58, I had finally found what I had been denied for so long, not just a title or success, but something more enduring. Acknowledgement. My name was now permanently etched beside the algorithm that had changed an industry. Exactly where it belonged. They told me I was replaceable. That I was too experienced, too seasoned, to keep up with where the industry was headed. But what they didn't understand, and what I hope you do, is that wisdom, when paired with courage, becomes unstoppable. If my story resonated with you, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been overlooked? Undervalued? Let go without recognition for all you built? Drop a comment below. Share your thoughts, your experience, or even just a word of encouragement. I read every message and I carry each one with me. To those of you still working in environments that don't see your full worth, let me remind you, your value does not diminish just because others fail to recognize it. Document your work. Protect your ideas. Keep receipts, timestamps, journals, whatever it takes. You may not need them now, but one day, they might just protect your legacy. And to anyone wondering if it's too late to begin again, I was 58 when I reclaimed my name. When I built something not just out of brilliance, but out of resolve. Your second act can be your strongest yet, but only if you own your story. So, if you're standing at a crossroads, if you're being asked to step aside, sit down, or fade into the background, I want you to remember this. You're not finished. You're just getting started. Support this message by liking, sharing, and subscribing if you believe experience should be celebrated, not discarded. Let's show the world what happens when people like us are finally seen. Because innovation isn't anonymous. And neither are we. Ava Reynolds.